We are live. Here we go. Thank you for joining us on a Thursday night, and welcome to Caching in the Northwest. You know, this is the only podcast dedicated to geocaching in the great Pacific Northwest. We're going to talk about caches and cachers unique to this little corner of the continent. So while you're finding deals at garage sales, we'll be caching in the Northwest.
That's right. And that means it's time. Well, wait a minute. It's time to bring in a gutsy guest. Some say he's not a lumberjack or a fur trader, and others say he doesn't live in an igloo or eat blubber or own a dog sled. All we know is he's called Keats94.
Thank you so much for having me on the show. It's an awesome intro, by the way, and I happen to be wearing the plaid to show it.
You're not a lumberjack, but you're okay.
Yes. Thank you.
Oh, now I got that song in my head.
Yeah.
Okay. Hey, folks, a quick reminder that we appreciate the support of all of our patrons, Keats being one of them, who help keep this podcast coming each and every week. And if you want to know more about this, supporting the show, click the Patreon link on that cachingnw.com website. And now's the moment you've all been waiting for. Right now. We call this the glow.
The glow.
It's the geocaching log of the week. So whether you read it or whether you wrote it, we want to hear about it because great logs simply make geocaching better. Send an email to feedback@cachingnw.com. Include the .com.
Yeah.
Email or call into 253-693-TFTC or use the voicemail tool on the website and show us how you glow. Now, tonight's glow came from Bounce. And you know what he did? He submitted it.
How did he submit it?
Emailing to feedback@cachingnw.com.
All right. Well, let's jump into that, shall we? He submitted it. It's written by Falconer Swarlos. Does that sound right?
Sure.
It's a recent one from this month, and it said the glow reads, "Apologies in advance for length of post, but it's for a good cause. Yesterday, I found my 299th hide. That's 42 in Snohomish." And he says, "I'm a statistics guy, so I wanted my 300th find to be memorable. Make it a memorable milestone, unlike my blasé 200th find."
I can tell you about my blasé 200th find.
Well, from a geocaching Instagram post, I found a travel bug hotel built by Bounce. It was amazing. So I searched for his other travel bug hotels. I found one in particular with 200 plus favorite points, and that would be my 300th find. Today was the day. After work, I was hell-bent to drive to this cache. Traffic was terrible. 2 hours to travel 36 miles on the east side and the south end. If this wasn't so built up in my head, I would have bailed. Cooler heads prevailed. I had to keep digging. I figured the first part out, but couldn't figure out the lock code. I didn't drive 2 grueling hours for nothing, so I called the CO. Thank Christ he answered. I introduced myself and my intention. He offered me one little hint, and I was on my way. I opened the lock, but there was another lockbox for the logbook. I puzzled that out and inked the log. No Wi-Fi and or internet connection due to proximity to a Kent police satellite office. 300 finds. Now, I know it's no big deal to y'all, but it is to me. Lastly, I dropped off 5 travel bugs, picked up 2. Thanks for the cache. Gets a favorite point from this cacher. And P.S. 0 time for more caching due to the gnarly traffic.
And, you know, it sounds like he's traveled here from quite a distance away, and this gnarly traffic is what we call Tuesday.
Yeah,
I mean, it's normal.
All the time. And I'd like to point out there, he says, I know 300 is no big deal to y'all. Well, hey, it is to me, because I just went and looked at my stats after I previewed that. I have never had a single calendar year with 300 finds in it. My biggest year was 200 something, and most of my years are in the double digits. So 300 is like 3 or 4 years worth of caching for me. It's like an hour and a half for Land Monkey, but you know, that doesn't count.
It doesn't
well,
count.
We're all on our own caching journey.
There you go.
I thought I had to sneeze, and then it didn't come out. So let's just wait.
Okay.
No, let's not.
That's not. Keep moving. Nothing to see here.
Nothing to see here. And you never know. It might just sneak out later. Hey, we got some news from geocaching.com. They released some stats on the Hidden Creatures promotion.
Oh.
Keats, how did you do on your Hidden Creatures?
I did remarkably well. I started off rather slow before my trip out east, but as soon as I landed, I just started finding a whole bunch of them, and I ended up probably getting with 100 caches, maybe 75 to 100 caches in my first day there. I just kind of hit the ground running, and yeah, it was quite an adventure, so to speak. Yeah.
So there were 180 countries with players who earned at least one Hidden Creature souvenir.
Cool.
And, you know, I took these numbers and I tossed them by our resident mathematician. That would be Limax. And he had some fun with them. Wits End, what do we know about 180?
Well, it's half a circle.
That's right.
It's way past my IQ. It's south on a compass.
There you go.
It's the sum of two squares. That's 6 squared and 12 squared.
See?
How about that? It divides 19 squared minus 1. Is that right? It's a number with a single repeated digit in base 14. That would be CC. You're fond of the letter C, aren't you?
I am. And, you know, it's yes in Spanish.
And, well, you know, it's an abundant number. Not just that there's a lot of them. That means that the sum of its proper divisors is greater than itself.
Does that seem possible? It has to be. But anyway.
If Limax said it, I believe it.
Exactly. That's how I feel. Okay. 180 countries with players who earned at least one. 59 countries with players who earned the World Turtle souvenir.
Oh.
What do we know
about 59?
What do we know about 59?
Well, according to Limax, it's what you do with your tongue in Roman numerals.
You licks.
Licks. That's Lix. It is the lowest number in the 7th set of twin primes. 3,
of course.
5, 7, 11, 13. Yeah. That's provided you don't count 3, 5, 7 as a triplet prime. And, you know, who would really? 59 is also an irregular prime. And, you know, we're fond of irregular things on this podcast.
Oh, yes.
It's an irregular prime because it divides the numerator of the 44th Bernoulli number.
That's right. What's a Bernoulli number?
Moving on.
Okay.
How many geocaches were found?
1,653,677 geocaches found roughly during that roughly 30-day period.
That's amazing. And did you know that's the product of two primes?
Is it really?
23 and 71,899.
Well, that's what I was going to say.
But it's a deficient number. The
Oh.
sum of its proper divisors is less than itself.
Along with Keats, 31,504 other people got the World Turtle souvenir.
That's amazing because that's the product of two primes, 5 and 6,301. It's got two representations. It's the sum of two squares. Do you really want to go through all this? We do.
I'm just so glad you're not asking me math questions.
It's the hypotenuse of two primitive Pythagorean triples, don't you know? The
Sure.
primitive Pythagorean triples, when all the numbers are relatively prime to each other.
I trust you.
Common factors.
Yeah, that was something I had no idea about. I actually learned something.
It's also a deficient number. I think a lot of geocaches are deficient in one area or another. Yeah. I tend to be deficient of finances.
Okay. I said there was 1.6 million geocaches found. There were 8,894,048 total log finds.
Wow. Well, that's a Harshad number.
Oh, folks,
It's a
yeah.
number that's divisible
course.
by the sum of its digits. And it's another abundant number. Because geocaches are abundant.
That's right. I find it interesting. So it's about, what, 7 logs per geocache found. So it's kind of interesting. And there was 1,435,611 miles tracked on hidden creatures trackables.
Oh, another deficient number. But it's the product of 3 primes, don't you know? 353 and 9,029. And the digits can be represented as sums and differences.
Okay.
So,
you got to admit that's kind of fun.
those are fun.
Yeah, I like
Mine makes
stats.
it fun.
And
I won't remember any of them 12 seconds from now, but
oh, not a clue. And but you know, I'm going to be looking for primitive Pythagorean triples from this point on.
of course.
Yeah.
All the way.
Yeah. That's my new thing. I got to find them.
And out of all those numbers, 31,505 was his favorite number of those numbers, he says in the chat.
That was the number of world turtle souvenirs. That's a tough word for me to say. World turtle. I have to work on that W or T or DT combination there. Now, so anyway, that was hidden creature stats. There is more news.
Do tell.
Well, a familiar face has returned to Gold Country Community Societies, that's the GCCS, which as of July 16th welcomes Marcy Down as its new executive director. You're going to know what this is in just a moment. Down, who since 2015 has been working for the Village of Cache Creek. How great a name is that, right?
Oh, yeah.
As office administrator and in payroll, was with the Gold Country Community Society from 2011 to 2015 as office administrator and program coordinator for the geocaching program. This is the Gold Country geocaches, folks. It was Down who started to work on phase 2 of the initiative, overseeing the second set of 72 caches, which were unveiled in 2012. She takes the position vacated by departing Chief Operating Officer Terry Hadwin.
Oh, yes. Terry Hadwin's been on our show as a guest.
Exactly. So now we'll have to have Marcy on the show as a guest to talk about Gold Country and what they're up to.
That's right. And there's a metric ton of awesome geocaches up in the Gold Country.
Yeah, it's a fantastically well done series. It's just it takes you to all these places you wouldn't otherwise, like you just drive by and all of a sudden, oh wow, a geocache is here and another historical landmark that now you know, right? So that's great.
And of course you found them all, right, Keats?
Not quite. There are still some ones way out in the mountains that I still gotta grab, but I think I have about 2 geocoins now that I've gotten from
good
country. So they give you a nice gold bar after 24 caches. So hence 24 karat gold, right? So
there you go.
Oh, I don't know if I made that coordinate. That's nice.
Well, hey, Keats94, we would like to thank you for coming on the show tonight.
Thank you.
To the podcast here. He's going to tell us, folks, about his geocaching experiences in Nova Scotia. We're over here in the Northwest. Nova Scotia's over there in the East. But hey, Keats, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Maybe somebody's joining us that's not familiar with your story. Where's your home? How did you get started in geocaching? You know, what's your ATM PIN number? Oh, never mind.
Well, I'll start with where the city I live in, and we'll see how the night progresses from there.
Okay.
But essentially, I'm from Burnaby, British Columbia. I was born in Vancouver, and then I made the long move out to Burnaby. And actually, for those who aren't familiar with the area geographically, Vancouver and Burnaby are next door cities, so it's not that big a move. But anyway, I live in Burnaby, and it's an awesome city. A lot of geocaches, home to the famous Skunk Tales series created by Scruffster. Highly recommended if you happen to be in Burnaby. check out some of those caches. It's a really worthwhile series, but you got to go through a gigantic maze to figure it out, and it takes forever. But once you find a skunk tails cache, it's definitely worthwhile. It feels like 10 finds after you find one of those things. But actually, when I first heard about geocaching, it was a friend of mine. We were going for a walk along Pitt Lake, and Pitt Lake, by the way, is a lake. It's quite a large lake, actually, east of Burnaby. We were walking along this road, this trail, and he was telling me, so my dad and I came across this container. It was hidden at the base of like some kind of bush near the lake, and anyway, so we went out there, and the cache was not quite there. It must have been muggled, I guess, as they say. But this was back in 2010. I don't know if I mentioned that, but anyway, so as we were, walking along, I thought this hobby could be kind of interesting. So I got home, and I got myself an account, and it changed my life ever since. And interestingly enough, I found my first cache on 420. So I at first I thought, do these things really exist? And so when I found my first cache, I was about as tripped out as the people downtown that day. But huzzah, geocaches do exist. So it was, and ever since I've been hooked, and I never thought that I'd reached the 9,000 mark, but here I am. So it's been a good addition to my life.
Nice. Now, regular listeners and those from our online chat community might know that you're on a bit of a geocaching streak. Would you tell us a little bit about that?
I am. Actually, interestingly, when I got back from Cape Breton Island, which I'll talk about later, but I realized that I was on a 17-day streak, because I was finding a geocache every single day when I was there, and I was like, I guess I have to keep this thing going and seeing how long I can keep it alive. And at that time, I was at 62 days. What was the maximum amount? Was my goal, or was my record at that time?
Okay.
Exactly, yeah. And
there you go.
And I thought, maybe I'll just do like 100 days and see what it is from there. And then I thought, once I reached 100 days, I'm like, okay, 150. We'll see what we can do there. And sure enough, I'm at day 309 of my streak, and I'm trying to aim for a 366-day streak. But of course, by that point, I'll probably want to make it to 400. We'll see how that goes. But just thought I'd do a bit of a shout out to all the reviewers out there that have made my streak possible, because I started rather late in the game with my find streak. So thank you to Brian and others who are potentially listening tonight.
Nice. Well, not only the reviewers, but the cache hiders who are out.
Thank you, cache hiders, as well. Yeah. Indeed. 100%.
If nobody hit them, we couldn't find them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, I actually think those who have started a streak a little later have an advantage over those, old people like us who have been in it forever. And, when we first started, a streak really wasn't possible.
This is true, but it's one of those things where when I first started caching, I just decided to find a whole bunch in my neighborhood, and then I just decided to get every single city, and then now about 8 years later, I am like trying to strategically plan which cache I go for. So if I have a day off, I'll go as far away as I can, so I can get the caches that I won't be able to find after work anyway. So sure. I'll just keep the caches in Vancouver and Burnaby for those crucial days. That's kind of my strategy, at least.
Nice. The game within the game.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
And Three Hams says in the chat, oh great, the pressure to hide.
Well, yeah.
It's all on you, Three Hams.
Do it, Three Hams. Just do it.
If Keats breaks his streak, we're going to blame you.
He also says in the chat that Keats lives uphill from him and looks down on him.
Yeah.
Well, okay.
Well, 309.
Geographic standpoint.
I was going to say 309 is quite a significant streak, and maybe somebody's listening out there that thinks, "Wow, that's impressive. I could never do that." I just want to throw out there, I'm on the other end of the spectrum. I looked at my stats. My longest consecutive streak is 9. So those of you listening, anybody can beat that streak. Just go for it. 309 days in a row. You might think Keats, well, he does nothing but geocache, but I venture a guess that he's got other interests and other hobbies out there. When you aren't geocaching, Keats, how do you spend your time?
Well, I guess in my spare time, I'm working primarily. I work at Mountain Equipment Co-op in Vancouver. It's one of those outdoor retailers that basically helps promote people getting outside and kind of promoting the active lifestyle. I guess in my spare time, I play my instruments and I paint a little bit. I do a little bit of watercolor and yeah, I kind of. I mean, I try to get outside as much as I can. I tend to get rather antsy when I'm inside, so I will need to be out at least once a day for about an hour or two. So at least to walk around the neighborhood is just fine. So yeah,
nice.
Yeah.
Now we had already mentioned that you're going to be sharing some road trip experiences, or a hashtag geocache road trip to Nova Scotia. First off, can you give us a little information and those listeners who may not know much about Nova Scotia?
Right. Well, it started off as a hashtag geocache flight trip from Vancouver, and then I got a car and a rental car in Halifax. But I digress. Basically, I wrote a little bit of a report, and I'll try to remember some of the stuff. But anyway, Nova Scotia is about 55,284 square kilometers, and it's on the east coast of Canada. It's between the North 43 and North 46 latitudes, and it entered the Canadian Confederation in 1867. It has around 943,000 people. And geographically, it's interesting because it's basically it's a peninsula that juts out from New Brunswick, and then it kind of goes in a northeast southwest fashion, and it definitely, a lot of earth caches explain the shape of Nova Scotia. I remember finding a few around Duncan's Cove, which is a hike I recommend just outside of Halifax, but. And on the north end, actually, I brought a little map with me here. This is this is a map. This is the Backroad Map Books kind of map key, and essentially what we have here is Cape Breton Island on the north end, and then the mainland down here. This is kind of like the peninsula that connects to New Brunswick up here, and Prince Edward Island, which is actually a separate province. From Nova Scotia is just up there. So yeah, Cape Breton Island is to the north end, and it's a very different place from the mainland. I noticed they actually have their own flag. This is the official flag of Cape Breton Island. It isn't an official provincial flag, but it's kind of it's more of a regional flag, I guess I would say. And I know that people out there who actually call themselves Capers definitely have a real sense of self-identity there. They're very proud of their island, and you can see that in their Gaelic culture and their Gaelic culture and their fiddles, and there are some breweries out there as well. So. Yeah, and so actually, apparently, the Gaelic language, which came out from the Celtic countries, there are about 300 native speakers on Cape Breton Island, and fluent speakers in Gaelic, and that's largely from the incorporation of the Gaelic College out there that teaches this ancient Celtic language. And it's basically gotten a lot of praise from the community, because there definitely is a real strong sense of tradition out there.
That's nice.
It is.
So a lot of places lose that as time goes on.
Yeah. And
it's good to see that the college is keeping it. Now, Gaelic, if I'm not mistaken, has some incredibly long words in it, does it not?
It is. Welsh is also a really. I remember there was that famous weather broadcaster that flawlessly listed out this Welsh town name, and apparently, actually, Welsh towns they tell a story. So that's probably why they're such they have such long names. But yeah, and like I said, actually, with Cape Breton having the fiddle with them quite frequently in their culture. They there was a guy actually by the name of John McDougall, and he actually wrote 38,000 fiddle tunes. And I was actually driving along the highway on Cape Breton, and I actually had to pull over because I was like, did I hear that right? Like 38,000 tunes. And they'd actually sat in someone's basement collecting dust for decades and decades, and some of those tunes actually hadn't even been played yet. So it was cool. Until last year, they brought the book out, and they started playing the tunes for the first time probably since they were written. So very, very cool. And as a fiddle player myself, it was kind of a pilgrimage going out there.
That's great.
Yeah.
So, you know, folks, stay tuned for the after show, because Keats is going to play all 38,000 during the after show
at the same time.
Oh, at the same time.
Little overdub. We're going to compress it all together there for you.
I'll just play a bunch of gibberish, and that'll be probably it.
It would still sound better than anything I could produce from a violin. I'll tell you that right now. Well, that's amazing. Nova Scotia seems like a great place to visit. You know, growing up, one of the things I like to read, I know it's maybe strange, maybe not. I had a Guinness Book of World Records that I used to flip through endlessly. And if I'm not mistaken, Nova Scotia is home to the Bay of Fundy, with the world's largest tidal shift. And it's been on my list of places I'd love to see ever since I was a kid for that reason. So
the Bay of Fundy is a gorgeous place too. It's definitely a fantastic part of the province.
So maybe someday I'll get to see it and go see the tides.
Definitely.
But tonight
on your way to Australia.
Well, yeah, everything's different in Australia. Tonight, though, we're talking about why a geocacher might want to go to Nova Scotia. What do you have to say about that, or the Canadian Maritimes in general?
Why would a geocacher want to go to Nova Scotia? Well, that's we could be here all night. Basically, a geocacher would want to visit Nova Scotia for just to see the passion that gets put into geocaches out there. I have to say that the Nova Scotia geocaching community, they're just a real passionate group of people that are excited to get people interested in the hobby. And some of the geocaches that I went for, actually primarily what you'll see out in the back roads of Nova Scotia, you'll see a lot of the GeoArt series. So the Nova Scotia lobster in Shelburne, which I'll just pull up my map again. It's just kind of in this part of the province. Okay. You basically got to solve a whole bunch of caches. It's about I can't remember how many caches it is. It's like around 75 to 100 caches. Anyway, so you go out and you find these, and it's fantastic. And some of them are quite creative hides too. Like they're not just a film canister attached to a tree. So it's definitely worth seeing. There was some GeoArt that I didn't do, like the Guysborough fish and the Celtic knot, and the evergreen. The Guysborough fish is kind of is on the north section of the mainland Nova Scotia. So definitely worth checking that out. It follows the same kind of solving pattern as the Shelburne lobster. And actually, a lot of great caches that I found were also in Cape Breton, on Cape Breton Island, and a lot of these caches are on a railway grade trail, and so they're every 160 meters, but or 161 meters, pardon me, but each one has its own flair to it. So the people that recently put them out, actually, I think they were published around last year. They're pretty fresh right now. The logbooks are still nice and dry, amazingly. But I found quite a few of those, and each one had its own kind of unique style to it. So I did like some of those out there. And yeah, there was another series that didn't quite get to, but if anyone out there is interested in challenge caches, there are a group of challenge caches that are that's kind of south of Halifax. And I actually, for the podcast, I printed out a military alphabet code cheat sheet because I'm not too familiar with the military codes. So I'll start with so the one of the GC codes that will get you to the general area of this challenge cache alley, as it's called, Statistic Alley, but it's a GC 6 Charlie 08. Okay, that was easy. All right. Wait, sorry, no. I was looking at the wrong GC code here. Sorry, GC 44 Foxtrot.
Yeah, Foxtrot. X-ray Juliet.
X-ray Juliet. There we go. Thank you. Okay. I will try to memorize that as time goes on. But
I don't have it memorized. I have a cheat sheet as well, but don't tell anyone.
Yeah, so it's a great grouping of challenge caches if you're into it. They get progressively more difficult to qualify for as you go up the valley, but that definitely gives one incentive to go up there for sure. And also, if you're into virtual caches, there are 2 that are kind of in downtown Halifax. The first one that I can recommend is First Post Halifax. Part of the First Post series, there were actually a bunch of these virtual caches that were placed from essentially each on each parliament in Canada. There were some that had been archived, but sorry, I see on the show notes here that that's changing. Anyway, sorry. So basically, First Post Halifax will take you to this spot, and you just got to answer a question. It's at Province House, which is the Nova Scotia legislature. It actually happens to be the oldest legislature in Canada, so definitely worth checking that place out for sure. Yeah, it's a brilliant place. If you're a political junkie like myself. But yeah, and also there was another virtual rewards cache that was published recently in Halifax called Do the Wave, and it's GC7 Bravo, thank you, 85C.
Charlie.
Sorry, Charlie.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's another great one where you just got to take a picture of yourself by the wave doing something fun on the wave. It's a public art thing that's on the boardwalk, and that's another place that is fantastic, is checking out the Halifax boardwalk.
Cool.
So yeah.
Now, Land Monkey's not here, but okay, let's talk about Earth caches anyway, even though he's not here, because he would read us the riot act if we had omitted any reference to Earth caches.
The Earth caches in Nova Scotia are absolutely fantastic, and
they have some there, really.
They really, oh yeah, Nova Scotia does have geology as well, believe me.
Okay, good.
So the first one that I would highly recommend checking out is called Fundy Rockhound. That's G Charlie 11 Romeo Delta 6. There we go. So yeah, it's a great Earth cache that will take you basically on a walk along the beach. The cache owner just asks you to find and identify some rocks that were listed on the cache page, and it's a really gorgeous beach. The rocks there, actually, I have some on my desk here. If you can see them properly here, they're of different colors. Most of the colors out there actually are kind of this terracotta color and this purple color. So the rocks there are quite interesting. There's actually, some people have said that they found amethyst, like amethyst crystals on that beach. Yeah, definitely worth checking that Earth cache out for sure. It's a good one. And also the Mahoney Bay Islands, Drumlins and Sills Earth cache, GC 6064 Papa, and definitely worth checking that out. It basically talks about Drumlin Islands, which I had never heard about before. Basically, Drumlin Islands are glaciers that kind of change the slope of the islands, and you're supposed to identify a few of those. So it was great. It was a really good educational trip as well, from a geologist's perspective.
Nice.
Yeah.
Trexer does say in the chat it's rock theft, and now we have evidence of that.
That's right.
It's been recorded. So.
You're in trouble now.
Next time I'll see if I can repatriate them, but they do look very nice in a rock garden.
Hey, you kept them in the same country. There's nothing wrong with that.
This is true. This is true. Yeah.
So that Fundy Rockhound would be Fundy Bay.
Correct.
That
Correct,
has
yeah.
the
Yes.
largest tidal shift.
Yeah.
As you know, everybody read in Guinness World Book of Records, because that was the only book worth reading when we were growing up. And it was still a book. You had to buy it every year.
Yeah, I couldn't wait for the next one to come out
Yeah.
every year.
We have
Ah,
books.
there were books back in the day.
Oh wow.
One year they came out with kind of a holographic cover, and that kind of put me off.
Is
I
this-
was like, no, that's too trendy.
Is this a book? I don't.
It's an
Oh
electronic
no
book.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we
Now you just
couldn't-
go to the website.
Yeah, we couldn't afford a website when I was a kid.
Do they still produce Guinness World Books?
I think so. The research
Interesting.
department could probably confirm this, but
Well, no,
I
we
believe so.
our research department is out, so we'll have to have
Oh.
the secondary research department
That's right.
come in. Limex says he enjoyed the World Almanac better.
Huh.
Yeah. Okay, so Keats, you were out in Nova Scotia. Now, did you just happen to jump on a plane and that's where the plane went, and that's why you went geocaching out there, or did you have a goal for this trip?
It kind of started off as that, like, I'm just gonna get a plane ticket and just go and see what I can see. But I realized I was getting on to number 9,000, so I just had to realize, well, okay, so Canada's first ever geocache is or first place geocache is out there. That's GC Bravo Alpha, and it was a great milestone in the sense, because it from a Jasmer perspective, it was nice to get that spot filled. And that was number 9,000. I still had to find quite a few caches before that one, but it definitely it was definitely worth it. I actually got there. It was one of the only rainy days on my trip, and I parked on the side of the highway. This particular cache is actually in the middle of a highway cloverleaf, and so you gotta there's a little bit of there's a bit of a shoulder on the side of the highway, and you can just kind of casually, of course safely, walk across this highway exit, and somewhere in the forest there's a trail that you can get to, and as you walk towards the cache, there's a nice sign that says Geocache Lane, and yeah, it was definitely cool. I was like, I knew that I was on the right track, and quickly
That would
found
be
it after that.
Pretty good indicator, yeah.
Yeah, it definitely helped. Yeah.
I'm gonna make sure that all the I suddenly forgot the who approves the geocaches? Come on, Chris.
The reviewers.
Reviewers?
Make sure that there's road signs pointing to geocaches from this point on.
That'd be amazing.
It would help.
Yeah,
That's not going to happen, is it?
Probably not, no.
I have my doubts. Yeah.
But in Nova Scotia, there is a road sign.
There are, yes.
All right.
For sure. Yeah, and apart from that, I kind of, from a non-geocacher's perspective, I did want to see the Alexander Keith's brewery in Halifax, because it's one of my favorite beers. So I had to definitely take a tour of that place, and the tours there are fantastic. I think they're around $17 for a tour, but they take you on this incredible walk through the brewery, and you try out different types of beer, and you basically sample different types of lagers, and then they play music and stuff like that. So it's great. But from a geocacher's view, I kind of just I made sure that I wanted to get that Shelburne Lobster GeoArt series near Shelburne. That was kind of important for me, and kind of casually going through towns. What I basically did is is I stopped into a town and then parked the car and then just walked around for a bit and found a whole bunch of caches, got a whole bunch of history lessons about the area, and yeah, taught me a unique some unique factoids about the area. Actually, the multi caches were great. There was a cache I had found in Digby. It's a multi cache that took me on a great history tour around there. So if you're a history buff, check out some of the I think it's like the one multi cache in Digby. So if it's there, it's there.
You know, geocaching is truly a good travel. I want to say a travel agent. You know, take you around from place to place. Geocaching will let you see some of those interesting spots. And, you know, I think it's interesting that Canada's first geocache is still active. No. See, America's first geocache is not still active. We have a plaque celebrating it, but it's not active. So it's impressive.
Interestingly enough, there actually is there's also a plaque dedicating Canada's first geocache, but the weird thing is that it is located nowhere near the actual location of Canada's first cache. So it's on a place called Graves Island. That's Grav, V as in Vancouver, ENES. It's a nice park, but it's interesting that they chose that spot for Canada's first geocache. I've of course got a whole bunch of photo ops with that plaque as well. But yeah, it was great. It was really cool. It was like I was a bit starstruck actually when I found this container. Yeah, so
very cool. So apparently there's a brewery in Halifax, and there's things to do other than geocaching there in Nova Scotia, which is nice, because a lot of us, well, the whole family or maybe your travel party, they're not all geocachers, sad to say. But maybe you're traveling to Nova Scotia to hit all these great geocaches, but your traveling companions aren't cachers. I don't know why you travel with them, but sometimes we do. Let's say, for example, somebody has a Muggle friend with them on the trip. Anything else you can recommend? I mean, what else do you need except a brewery tour, right? But there's probably something else too.
There are a lot of great places to check out in Nova Scotia, and also Halifax. I think it was Mike Myers that said that Halifax is kind of the Canada's what's the word? The party town. It's basically a underrated party town. It's there are many bars. So if you are into beer, then definitely check it out. But Pier 21, which is if you're into any type of Canadian history, immigration history, definitely check out Pier 21, because that was where the first immigrants arrived on Canadian soil. So I didn't have time to check that out, but next time for sure. I've been told it's a great museum. And there might be something happening at the Scotiabank Centre that's kind of like the main theater area to see shows and stuff like that. Definitely a good place to check out. I think there was the jazz festival just before I left when I was there. So a lot of great music and stuff over there as well. In Halifax primarily, but there are many other places to see live music. The Africville Museum, which I need to check out next time. Basically, it's about the African Canadian history that's in Nova Scotia. Yeah, very very cool stuff. And the Art Gallery of Nova Scotia, which I think is near the Africville Museum. That's another great place to check out art, and there are many exhibits that you'll see there for sure, varying types. And also the Atlantic Canada Aviation Museum. So if you are like myself and you're into planes as well, definitely check out that aviation museum. A lot of great Canadian history moments in that building. And of course, Province House, which is what I mentioned earlier. But Province House is Canada's first legislature. It was built apparently before the National Parliament in Ottawa. And actually, a funny story. When I was on the tour, it was just the tour guide and I, and we were walking around the building, and we got to the chamber, and she was telling me why along kind of where the ceiling, I forget what you call them, where the ceiling meets the wall, there's this design of birds. And interestingly, at the time, and this was way back in I think the 1800s, there was a land dispute between Maine and New Brunswick, and so there was a representative from New Brunswick that was in attendance in the Nova Scotia legislature, and he looked up and he looked at these birds on the side of the building, and he, with his cane, decided to knock the heads off 11 of these things, because he thought that these birds were American eagles, symbolizing American identity, of course. So, but really, actually, they were hawks. And to this day, in the Nova Scotia legislature, you will look up and you'll see a bunch of headless hawks, wrongfully executed by this angry New Brunswicker. So.
Oh, so they have a bit of a temper, do they?
It has I guess from a historical perspective, yeah. I mean, they were on the tour. They were actually my tour guide was telling me that when when certain political parties are in power, they actually shift the location of their icons. Like they have a painting, and depending on whether they're the official opposition or the government, they'll shift the paintings over. So there's a bit of it's a bit of a spectator sport out there for sure.
That sounds like fun.
It is for sure. And of course, like I said, the Alexander Keith's Brewery, definitely worth checking out, of course. And the Celtic Music Interpretive Center. This is outside of Halifax. This is way out in on the west coast of Cape Breton, in a small town called Judic. And actually, when I first read the name of that town, I thought it's Judique, like I pronounced it like the way that the French would probably pronounce it.
Yeah, but of course.
But they just pronounce it Judic out there, so I'm like, okay, fine. I thought I was being polite. So. But anyway, yeah, it's out in Judic on the west coast of Cape Breton Island. You'll hear a lot of live fiddle music. So not only Judic, but further up the road in Mabu, which is actually, if anyone out there knows who the Rangan family is, that's actually where they live, or where they grew up. And so they're kind of a folk band, and they're really into fiddle music as well. And they actually own a pub out in Mabu called the Red Shoe. And the Red Shoe is a brilliant pub filled with live music, excellent food. The fish and chips there are to die for. The soup is amazing, and the pot pie is amazing. It's definitely worth checking out. And of course, there are campgrounds relatively nearby. So if you've had a few pints, you're not that far away from camp. It's definitely a fun part of the island for sure. I focused on that, like this year's trip, I focused on the west coast of Cape Breton, and further up past Mabu, you get into Cape Breton Highlands National Park. And there are some great camping opportunities. And actually, Cape Breton is home of the famous Cabot Trail. And the Cabot Trail is around 300 kilometers, and it kind of circles the north part of Cape Breton Island, kind of going along some of the more scenic viewpoints. And there are some excellent earth caches out there as well, some of which were actually very easy to do. You just kind of identify fault lines and stuff like that. So it talked about I forget the name of the fault line, but it's a fault line that actually stretches from Cape Breton Island to Scotland. It shares the same valley. It just goes under the Atlantic, of course. But definitely check out the Cabot Trail. And every October in Cape Breton, there is the Celtic Colors International Festival. And that's held in many small communities in and around Cape Breton. And that's usually early to mid-October. And the reason why they call it Celtic Colors is because at that time, all the deciduous trees turn this beautiful orange and red color. So definitely a nice time to go. If you're going to check out Cape Breton, particularly, definitely check it out in early to mid-October for sure. Yeah.
Nice. So that's definitely the place to go in the fall to see the colors, just like we would go to, East Coast to Maine and such to see colors change there. So
absolutely.
Nice. Now,
and,
go ahead.
Sorry, I just should point out that if you want to check out any more further details, check out novascotia.com /C-do /attractions, and you'll find out more information that way.
Nice.
I will put that into the chat right now. Watch me go.
Oh, thank you.
Look at that.
Technology,
isn't that great?
For the win. Amazing.
Now, once you get out to Nova Scotia, you did a bit of traveling. What is the best way to get around?
The best way to get around, I mean, when you arrive, usually flights tend to fly to Halifax from Vancouver, from Toronto. Usually when you fly to Halifax, you have a layover in either Montreal or Toronto. But when you get to Halifax, there's a brilliant transit system out there, and that'll get you to downtown relatively easily. There actually is a bus that takes you from the airport over to downtown. Then the fare itself is actually is $3.50, but usually any other fare in the city of Halifax, in the regional municipality, is around is $1 cheaper. And the reason for the extra dollar from the airport is it goes over a toll bridge. So it's definitely relatively affordable as transit goes. But definitely check out halifax.ca /transit for more details. Fair time, if you when you purchase a ticket, it lasts around 90 minutes, it'll get you from point A to point B relatively easily. But when I first arrived, I definitely had to use my transit app on my phone. I was a bit I wasn't jet lagged, but I was like, oh, this is a new city on the other side of the country, and not exactly TransLink as we have in Vancouver, but
sure.
Definitely a functional system for sure.
Yeah.
And then when after you've made your way from the airport, there are many rental car places like Hertz, Enterprise, and Budget, and they're all kind of within the Halifax regional municipality. Most of them are in downtown Halifax, but you'll find a few also in Dartmouth too. So definitely worth like if you want to check out further away from Halifax, then definitely rent a car, and you'll see a lot of cool things. So
is Halifax probably the best, base of operations? Do you want to just pick an area there? Is there other areas?
I would say Halifax is a good place to start. And if you're into, just checking out the mainland, definitely start in Halifax. But if you really want to see Cape Breton and to focus on that particular part of the province, then there are flights from Halifax to Sydney. Or you can also just as easily drive up there. Actually, it's around 3-ish hours depending on what highway you take. But you can fly to Sydney relatively easy. I think there are 2 flights a day.
Well, those are metric hours, of course, but
correct. Well, yeah.
Yeah, very similar to imperial hours.
Oh, very much. Yes, yeah.
Now, how did you plan your trip? I mean, I know you wanted to hit these big geo arts, say the lobster, and I looked at them and I can think of the wine glass, and that's not the one you hit.
There's a fish.
The fish in the tree, the evergreen. How did you plan your geocaching route?
The initial plan was to start in a clockwise fashion, and I kind of wanted to see if I can circumnavigate the whole province. And I did that with the mainland primarily. But what I kind of did is I looked at the map and I thought, okay, so if I'm going to be leaving from Halifax, how much distance do I want to have until my next town? Basically, usually it's around 150 kilometers was the average. So I thought, okay, if I can get 150 kilometers done in a day, then I'm good. And then all I need to do is just ask the Googles and basically find a campground near me.
Wait,
and
so
usually
you're telling me there's data there as well?
I did have a nice fresh set of data time that I got on my phone. Okay. Which was actually pretty invaluable. But if I was, of course, outside of satellite reception, well, I would have to find a Timmy's for sure, Tim Hortons. But yeah, I basically just looked at the map and went. I went like my first stop on the road trip was in Bridgewater. And actually what I did before I had left was I contacted the local Nova Scotia geocaching community on Facebook. And I asked, oh, so, do you know of any free places to camp in and around the province? And there were some articles that were given to me and or sent to me. And also there were people that were like, my backyard, pitch a tent on my property, and that's that, free of charge. And I was like, well, thank you. I was, very grateful for that because I was already on a bit of a tight budget. But it was really good. So my first night in Bridgewater, I actually ended up after getting back from Peggy's Cove, which is another excellent place to check out, by the way, just south of Halifax. I ended up getting to this cacher's property at around like 11:30 at night, and I'm driving down this logging or this kind of dirt road, and I'm just kind of using the coordinates, and I'm driving through the woods, and I thought, like they're definitely like bears and Sasquatches or whatever, what have you, in these woods. And he actually lives he lives somewhere else, but he had property on this lake. It was a gorgeous lake, and I got there, and all I could hear was the cry of a loon and just the waves on the lake. It was a really good experience. But I was very grateful for my car's headlights because I still had to pitch my tent. So, but it was great. And then after that, I kind of headed down to the Shelburne Lobster, and just kind of relied on Tim Hortons Wi-Fi for the most part, uploading pocket queries and kind of just saying, oh, look, this looks like a cool town. I'm going to stop here and find a few traditionals, find a few multis, find a virtual if there are any there. It was kind of I tried to make it not too structured because there were a lot of great other places that I needed to stop at while I was there. So
of all the places that you stopped to cache, do you have any favorite geocaches and all that?
Well, of course, Canada's first cache, but there was an excellent hike I did called Cape Split, and Cape Split is it's a peninsula that juts out into the Bay of Fundy, and it's a bit of a long hike, but there were some excellent caches out there that brought you to some scenic areas. Photo opportunities were fantastic out there. And once you got to the tip, you had this great earth cache to do, and had some lunch, and then headed back. And it was definitely a memorable part of the trip for sure. What other stuff? Oh yeah, and then of course doing the Celtic Shores Coastal Trail. Fantastic caches out there as well. Like I said, very very creative and well put out and well thought of for sure.
Nice. Now, I mean, we can see and hear your passion when you're talking about this. You had a great time. If somebody else wanted to do a trip like yours, how much time would they need to get around Nova Scotia?
See, that's the thing. For myself, I would have probably done about I would have probably done 2 weeks. For my for my trip out there recently, I did 11 days. I do think it's good to take your time, but if you only want to go for a week, then definitely check out some of the trails in and around Halifax. There are some, and within Halifax you can check out Piggy's Cove. So if you're going there for a shorter amount of time, then definitely check out some of the touristy places around Halifax. And a week to 2 weeks is fine. And Cape Breton, you probably, for me, because I like that place so much, I'd probably go for 2 or 3 weeks, buy some land out there.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would love to spend 2 weeks exploring Nova Scotia. But speaking of time, we're running up an hour here on the podcast. So before we bring it all to a close, are there any other things you'd like to add?
The biggest thing that I learned, and I almost forgot to do this, was bring tick tweezers. Ticks are really, really common in Nova Scotia. I was bitten by 4 of them, and thankfully I hadn't had any further symptoms. But I just the basic tick tweezers that pull the tick out is just fine. Really, really, just spray yourself with bug spray, and just kind of check every night. Just make sure that you don't have any ticks on you.
Yeah.
Big time.
Nice. If somebody wanted to see your pictures, follow you online, look at all the adventures you're doing, where would they find you on social media?
You can find me on Instagram at Keats Morton. Basically my first name and my last name. And you can also find me on Twitter, though I'm not usually on Twitter that much. You could probably find me mostly on Instagram. Obviously, if you want, check me out on Facebook. I have a Facebook group called Keats 94's Geocaching Adventures. Definitely. I'm hoping to get more posts on that pretty soon.
Very cool.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, we would love to thank everybody for listening, and thanks Keats 94. Definitely go check out at Keats Morton. I'm at Wits End. He's at Caching NW. And all the rest of the sponsors, the supporters, especially those faithful Denali level supporters, we'd like to thank you. That'd be Bounce, Team Squirrel, Limax, and WorldCaching.com. If you'd like to know more about supporting our show, go over to CachingNW.com. It's a great website, by the way. But there's a link there called Patreon, and you can learn all about being a patron and supporting the show. The people that we would like to thank that have done that are B Pendragon, Broncos Fan for Life, Sprouter, Camp Clan, Tick Magnet, Kev MacD, Subway Mark, Doramore, Dune Buddy, Kid Vegas 19, Geo Nav Pros, Wino Seattle, Acker Doc, Billy Robson, Nice, Antaeus, Keats 94, Curiosity Girl, Trex Zero, and MC3 Cats.
Nice. Most of all, we want to say thank you for taking the time to listen to this episode of Caching in the Northwest. Don't forget that you can be part of the show. Give us a call, 253-693-TFTC. Leave us a comment, ask a question, pull us around in a kayak any time of the day or night. Of course, you can always email us, feedback@cachingnw.com. Also, your support helps keep quality shows coming. If you like this show, click on that Patreon link on the cachingnw.com website, like all those people we just mentioned. You can also subscribe on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and more. The show's produced by Chris Umfenauer and Jay Kennedy, hosted by Chris J. and Jim Paulwitz. The show's licensed under Creative Commons Attribution 3.0 license. Copyright 2018 by Chris Umfenauer. And folks, we encourage you to stay tuned for
the after show.
It's just so much fun, isn't it?
It's so great.
We only have a couple of things that were mentioned. If you're following along in the chat and you think, hey, there's something I want to ask, it doesn't relate to this topic, use the hashtag FATAS, that's for the after show, and we'll toss it in there. Like Iham did. He asked, where's the monkey?
What monkey?
I don't know.
I think he's on the island or on a ferry or something like that.
I think he's spending time with family. Yeah,
he's spending time with family. Trexer said, I've added so many locations that I want to visit to cache since I found the podcast.
That's great.
Awesome.
Yeah. And, each week doing the podcast, like, oh, I got to get out there.
Yeah.
Nova Scotia sounds great. I want to go out there now. Limax, our resident mathematician, says 180 is also the sum of the angles in a triangle.
That it is.
Is it always? No, there are a couple of odd triangles you can get, isn't there?
No. 3 angles add up to 180.
I thought there was an exception.
You chew on that while I contribute that he also said he looked up the Bernoulli numbers when making the list, and the explanation was pretty involved, and he couldn't find a nice 2-sentence explanation.
That makes me feel better. Because I only know about the Bernoulli effect as far as airflow. Because I had a Bernoulli drive.
Yeah.
Back then it was a spinning disk, a spinning hard disk, and it uses the Bernoulli air effect to help actually stiffen that flexible material and make it a good writing surface. So.
Yeah, they were great. I only had the Bernoulli walk. I couldn't afford the drive. But
thanks to this podcast, I learned what Bernoulli is, so that's good.
He's a scientist. Or was he a scientist or mathematician? Anyway. Also, MC3 Cats added there's a Titanic Where I Go cache in Halifax.
Nice.
Definitely. And I should also point out that the Halifax explosion was another important quite a significant part of Halifax's history. And I believe there is also a museum out there somewhere that talks about it. And there are some multi-caches and some mystery caches that talk about it. Basically, it was a collision between an ammunition boat and a passenger ship.
Wow.
And it was one of the largest explosions in the world's history. Actually, I think it was the largest explosion. Non-nuclear explosion, and I think so far in all of world's history so far.
Wow,
even more than Mythbusters.
Yeah. Yeah, the blasted blubber beyond all believable bounds. Oh no, that was a West Coast explosion.
That was a West Coast thing. I've got to look up the Halifax explosion now.
Yeah.
Dora Moore says there is an exception to that triangle rule. Wait, guys, stop putting up chat because I can't read the old one. They're doing it now. Limax helped me with a puzzle on Vancouver Island. The angles added up to 200.
Yeah, that's weird geometry though.
Yeah, it's not normal stuff.
In plain geometry, it's always 180.
Yeah, exactly. I completely agree with you. But I know there's an exception to it. I just don't remember what it is. It's in plain geometry.
Yeah.
In hyperbolic geometry, it's less than 180. In spherical geometry, it's greater than 180.
So they average out to 180, see?
You're right. There you go. Oh, and we're at about 180 degrees from the start of the show.
It's about 180 degrees here in my shack.
Oh, man, it is warm tonight, isn't it?
It is. Very much.
But not in Nova Scotia. Maybe we should all go there.
It's a bit of a heat wave out there right now, but come the winter time, it'll be the exact 180 degrees from 30 degrees out there right now.
And we're talking Celsius, 180 degrees.
Sorry,
Celsius
different. Yes.
Indeed. And 180 is the sum of the angles in the triangle.
Yeah,
I heard that somewhere.
And the compass heading for south, which this conversation is gone. Sorry. Hey, folks, thank you for joining us. This show has run long, but we have packed it with good information. And until next week, get out and get caching in the Northwest.